Welcome to Metro Talk. I'm Kent Shuffle. Thanks for being with us. Jim Schrader, the publisher of the Telegraph, is alongside. Welcome, Jim.
Hi, Kent.
And Pat Gowan, one of the editors with the Post-Dispatch, is here as well. Welcome, Pat.
Hi, Kent.
Pat, the Illinois Supreme Court may finally hear a case that questions whether or not parents should be notified if their child is having an abortion. That Parental Notification Act was enacted in 1995, but has never been enforced as a result of a pending suit. Supreme Court is now maybe getting ready to hear the case. Is it time? Should the Supreme Court hear the case? And if it does, should parents be notified that a child's about to have an abortion?
Imagine having a law on hold for 16 or 17 years. It's pretty amazing. And not my place to say whether they should or shouldn't. You think I'm going to touch that one with a 10-foot pole? It's crazy. But the legislature of the state of Illinois said this is the proper law, and it seems like it ought to get a proper hearing one way or another, and either the law as enacted ought to be enforced, or it ought to be repealed, but to hang in limbo for essentially almost a generation, or won't be much short of a generation, that's pretty amazing to me that they did that. One of the things that bothers me about it, I have a hard time imagining with a really good relationship with your child that a pregnant daughter will not come to you for counsel and advice. I'm not being naive here because I realize not all would do that. But this law is essentially aimed at the ones who would not. Most specifically, it seems to me the ones who may be rebellious or the ones who don't trust their parents or the ones whose parents' views differ dramatically from their own. So it raises the question of a safety valve for children who have a legitimate reason not to notify their parents. This law does. It allows them to petition the court and go to court to get an exemption to have an abortion without the parental consent. It seems to me like it's all kind of much ado about nothing. I doubt it's going to matter a whole lot given the safety valve for kids to have a way around it. The piece of it I've never understood, and this reminds me of how little I understand it, is this. The law says that if you are under age 18, you must get parental consent for an abortion. But Illinois law says 17 is the age of consent for sexual intercourse, which means you can legally become pregnant at your own choice at 17. But there is this year period where we trust you to become pregnant, but we don't trust you to deal within the law. A lot of people don't like abortion, and they have every right not to, but within the law, not to deal with it. You're not allowed to deal with it within the law by abortion. It seems to me like that should have been brought back into sync. It would make the issue a lot simpler. If the age were, for example, 17 and beyond could decide, and under 17 requires parental consent, that opens up a whole new vista because a child who becomes pregnant under the age of 17 is also the victim of a crime according to Illinois state law. So that triggers other aspects as well. It just seems like it would make more sense if the two ages at least conform, but of course that's not something that would be on the table with the lawsuit. Given the history of this thing, I'm guessing that you'll get a ruling out of the Illinois Supreme Court, sometime around 2036.
Jim, the Illinois Supreme Court may finally take up a 1995 law that was enacted, which said that children should have a notification must be sent to the parents of children who are going to receive an abortion. Supreme Court may finally now rule on whether or not that's a constitutional law. Should they be dealing with it now?
Well, now's as good a time as any, but as Pat says, it may be years before a ruling comes down. What I find interesting about this, and I have a 19-year-old son, up until the age of 18, even though he had a health insurance card with his name on it, from my health insurance, many procedures that he might need still required a parental okay up until 18. I remember, going on vacations and he was going to stay with his grandparents or he was going to stay with one of his stepsisters. We would have to write a letter and have it notarized saying that these people could seek medical help for our underage son while we were outside the country. But it wasn't really a legal requirement had he been a girl and shown up for an abortion. We wouldn't have to be notified. I find that a disconnect there. I understand both sides. I mean, some children have excellent relationships with their parents, as Pat points out, and the first person they would tell should they show up with an unwanted pregnancy would be their mother or their father or a sibling. Others, not so much. Some religious groups still to this day will ostracize someone for a pregnancy out of wedlock and almost disown the child. That this law could create problems for that type of family. That a girl has, in her mind, made a mistake. In the eyes of possibly her parents in church, she may have committed some type of a mortal sin. And now the law says the parents have to be notified when she's just trying to take care of the problem. I understand both sides. What I don't understand is one more law in the state of Illinois that is passed by the legislature with no teeth and no way of enforcement, and it takes forever to languish around in the court system before any decisions are ever made. We either need it to wind its way through the Supreme Court and find it a valid law, or find it unconstitutional and just get it off the books.
We'll have more Metro Talk coming up right after this.
Hello and welcome to the Lewis and Clark Minute. Today we're going to check out the music program with Dr. Teresa Crane.
Have you always wanted to learn how to play the piano? Maybe you wanted to learn Beethoven's Für Elise. Or maybe you like a more popular style like Jim Brickman. Or maybe you like jazzy blues. You can learn all this and more right here at Lewis and Clark Community College.
This has been your Lewis and Clark Minute.
When you open a book, you can explore new lands, make new friends, and discover new adventures. There are amazing possibilities when you open your mind to reading. Explore new worlds. Read.
60-inch screen, high definition. Football season is coming up. You can watch it right here. What do you think?
I'll take it.
Huh? Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
You're right. I don't need it.
This is Metro Talk. Pat Gowan and Jim Schrader here. I'm Kent Scheffel. Jim, some state lawmakers are upset over attempts to give tax breaks to Sears and the Chicago Mercantile Exchange in an effort to get those businesses to remain in Illinois. They threatened to move out of the state. The bottom line is, should the lawmakers be looking at giving breaks to specific businesses when they make a threat like that, or should they be looking at breaks that affect all businesses?
Well, it not only angered some of the lawmakers, it angered the editorial board of the Telegraph, because we editorialized on it actually yesterday, which was Monday. A year ago, roughly this time, it was decided in a 11th hour or 11:30, as the clock may be, it was decided that the personal income tax was going to have to go up by 67%, and the corporate income tax was going to go up by 76.5% because of the dire straits that the state is in. Somewhere in the $13 billion deficit range. And all of the legislators said there's just nothing we can do about this. This is the only way we can start to climb out from the hole that we're in. This is a necessary tax, and none of us like voting for this, but it had to be done, or we were going to go to junk bond status, and this had to happen. So it passed, went into effect January 1st, and immediately the weeping and wailing starts from some of the major companies in the state. And why I say weeping and wailing started from them is because that's the ones we heard about. The little guys didn't have a wheel that was squeaky enough to get anybody's attention in Springfield. Sears did. CME, the Chicago Mercantile and Chicago Board of Exchange said, hey, wait a minute, we're not going to stand for this, you better do something. Well, then the Brain Trust in Springfield said, oh, well, we didn't know anybody was going to react like that. We thought everybody was just going to happily pay, 76% more in income tax, and we didn't know somebody was going to revolt. And immediately they said about how we're going to save these jobs by lessening the effect of this tax. Well, that says to me either they didn't know what the devil they were doing when they passed the tax, or they underestimated the reaction of businesses in the state of Illinois, or it's okay for you little people to pay the income tax increase, but we're going to take care of these big guys over here because, after all, this would be political suicide if Sears and CME moved out of Chicago and moved out of the state of Illinois. It would seem to me that the tax code from the state of Illinois needs to be reviewed from top to bottom. If major corporations say they can't stand a 76% increase in their income taxes, I suspect most small business owners in the state can't afford it either. But we're not going to do anything for them. They're going to have to pay the freight. They're going to have to cover the shortfall to these major employers, and there are others that threaten to move as well. It's not right that some continue to reap benefits of their size while we, the little folks, are having to pay the freight. This is similar to what's going on with the Occupy Wall Street people, the 99%ers and the 1%ers. The 1%ers get rich and the 99% pay. The 1%ers in this case being Sears and CME, and the 99%ers being the rest of the small businesses in the state. Thankfully, it did not pass. Basically, with insufficient votes, they're saying we're not going to pass this $250 million in tax rebates, $100 million of which would have gone to Sears and CME, and we will revisit it come next session. Sears may move. State of Ohio has put together a $400 million package to relocate their headquarters to Cleveland. I guess that may happen, but either we really need the tax and we're going to have to enforce it to everyone and let the cards fall, or we just say we don't really need the tax and we'll get through without it anyway.
Pat, some state lawmakers are a little upset because they're saying we shouldn't be doing special tax breaks for Sears and the Chicago Mercantile Exchange after those businesses threatened to leave the state. Are we approaching this in the right way? Should we be dealing with big businesses if they're threatening to leave, or should we just look at some kind of package that affects all business?
I think the taxpayer should rise up and demand a law that no government provides financial incentives for any business anymore. But as long as some do, it's very hard to play the game without being part of it. I think the argument in this case is that the economic consequences to the state of losing those employers would be worse than the economic consequences of abating their taxes, which doesn't seem fair, but in a world of reality, it is triage. It is trying to decide what is the greater damage to the state of Illinois, and it might be letting them go. You can't possibly get a bill through like this without doing something for the other side of the political spectrum, so this also included an increase in the personal tax exemption for Illinois income tax filers, and it also included a better credit for low-income people. Now there's talk of trying to redo this with those things split off from this bill as separate pieces. Wink, wink, in my mind, that means, okay, well, we'll pass mine, but not yours, whichever one it is. But it's interesting, it wasn't concern for the poor, concern for the individual taxpayer that drove this. Those were just adornments that were put on something to try to get it through. I think the Sears tax break proposed in Illinois was $15 million a year for 10 years, which pales by comparison to $400 million from Ohio. But if all this stuff is up for bid all the time anyway, does it end with this? Will somebody come along and offer Sears $400 million more somewhere else, and we've got to do something else to bend over backward? Whoever got us into this, where taxpayers' money is incenting the location of businesses, I've said it on this program before, and I say again, at least figuratively, ought to be shot.
We need to take a break. We've got more Metro Talk coming up in just a couple of minutes.
Hello and welcome to the Lewis and Clark Minute. Today we're going to check out the radio broadcasting program in WLCA with Mike Lemons.
Have you ever listened to your favorite radio station or your favorite disc jockey and say, you know, I could do that? Or maybe you're the type of person who says, I could never do something like that. Well, with the help of first-year mass comm student John, we're going to show you just how easy it is. Each voice intro starts with talking about the band that just played, and we add a station identifier. Next, you want to offer some information that may be of interest to your audience. And finally, tell the listeners what the next song is, who sings it, followed by another station identifier. John will do one live now.
Solar Sun Pickup Substitution on WLCA. The Big Pink released their debut album called A Brief History of Love. The single is off that album. It's The Big Pink with Dominoes. It's on College Radio Studs 89.9.
This has been your Lewis and Clark Minute.
What's that? I don't know. Something I kind of made. Ooh, what's it do?
What do I do? Well, thanks for asking. I ring my bell and I like to dance. What do I do? Well, thanks for asking.
How? Yeah, it still needs a little work.
Anything's possible. Keep thinking. Get started on your own inventions or just play some games at inventnow.org.
Sounds like you could use some Van Gogurt. It's fortified with arch-rich nutrients to improve your math and reading skills. Catch!
Van Gogurt. Thanks. So what's the deal with your ear?
Always with the ear, huh?
Feed your kids the arts. For 10 simple ways to learn how, visit AmericansForTheArts.org.
This is Metro Talk. I'm Kent Shuffle, Pat Gowan and Jim Schrader here. Pat, the number of 25 to 34-year-olds who've moved into the St. Louis region has increased for the past 3 years. That's a reversal of what we had been seeing. How much optimism should we read into that trend? How important is that trend to see that demographic on the increase?
I think it would look better if it were happening against a different economic backdrop, not to discount the importance of it, but a lot of people aren't moving around the country the way they used to. In fact, one study says fewer interstate moves than have ever been recorded in the time that the survey had been taken, and that was going back to 1948. People are staying put because of the economy. But the Brookings Institution examined census figures from the St. Louis area from 2008, 9, and 10 and found an average in that 24 to 35 age group. They found an average of 870 more people at the end of the year than at the beginning of the year in those age groups, which showed some growth. I made a quick list. The other growth places: Austin, Seattle, Dallas, Houston, Denver, which are pretty good company to run in. The losers in the same category: Miami, Detroit, Chicago, New York City, and Los Angeles, with increasingly large losses. We were pretty close in terms of the gains and losses. Some of these losses are in the tens of thousands. Some of the gains were well into the thousands. So 870 is not a very big number, but if it only represents a stopping of the outflow of the young people who are the future of the metropolitan area, who are the future of the workforce, it's a good sign. I don't think there's any bad way to look at it. The only question is how much optimism to place on its shoulders, and that I'm not sure about.
Jim, how excited should we get about the fact that the number of 25 to 34-year-olds has increased in the St. Louis region during the past 3 years?
I don't know that it's necessarily cause for celebration, but it's better than being on the bad side that list. For years, we've lamented the brain drain, the brain loss of kids from the Midwest going away to college and staying away or relocating to California, to the Silicon Valley, or going to some high-tech jobs somewhere else in the country. The fact that we can keep some of them here is certainly a good thing. Even downtown St. Louis, a lot of the redevelopment of the lofts and the condos in downtown St. Louis are targeting those 25 to 34-year-olds. There's nightlife down there that's close to jobs. They can bicycle. They can, if they work for Wells Fargo or some of the big firms down there, it's an easy walk or an easy commute on the bus lines, as it is in Chicago and some other areas. St. Louis remains very affordable as a place to live, especially when you compare it to New York, you compare it to Los Angeles and Seattle, for that matter. So I think it's great. So often St. Louis is on the losing side or on the negative side of some of these studies when they're done. And if we can show a blip in younger people staying here or not, or either locating back here or not going away, I think that's good news, and we'll take it for what it's worth. It's 837 people. It's better than being down 837.
Pat, it's been 3 years since the sale of Anheuser-Busch to InBev. Have the results of that sale been better or worse than expected now that we're 3 years into it?
Well, it depends on what you expected. Employment in the St. Louis area is down to about 4,000, which is down by about a third from what it was when InBev took over. Anheuser-Busch was a remarkable company because the family was so deeply rooted in the St. Louis area and was so involved in philanthropies and so involved in a corporate culture that was envied in many places, both in terms of level of compensation and the number of employees and all these things. And InBev is a more cold, calculated, dollar-driven operation, which has no sentimental attachment to St. Louis whatsoever. Some people were aghast to find that they're now cutting off the funding for the St. Louis float for the Rose Bowl parade after decades and decades of representing St. Louis, but I don't think anybody should be surprised. There are rumors they'll get rid of the Clydesdales, and they've said no. Rumors they'll get rid of Grant's
Grant's Farm.
Grant's Farm, I'm sorry, yeah. Rumors get rid of Grant's Farm, but they're trying to get the federal government to take it over as a park, but they haven't done anything about that yet. But in my heart, given time, I would imagine maybe there'll be fewer Clydesdales, if any at all, and there'll be maybe no Grant's Farm down the line. And I have no way to know that except to look and see that those are not money-making bottom line things for a company that is a money-making bottom line company. There's nothing wrong with this company. It does business like an awful lot of other companies did. It's just that Anheuser-Busch was a different kind of institution, the kind of thing that you look at and you think it will last forever, but then when you look when it's gone, you realize that it would be sufficiently fragile through the generations of people and through the value that could be acquired if you were to sell it to a more bottom line oriented corporation. You'd see that it really was never going to last forever. It was just a question of when it stopped, and it happened to stop in our time.
It's been 3 years,
Not
Jim.
uncommon. Not uncommon for family-owned businesses. Pat and I both worked for newspapers that used to be family-owned businesses, and then corporations bought them, and things changed. Priorities changed. Pet projects that the Pulitzers might have supported for years, Pulitzer Inc., and then Lee Enterprises might not see the value in that. St. Louis Cardinals, controlled by the Bush family for years. Augie was the god of the St. Louis Cardinals, and now it's run more like a business. The Telegraph, owned by the McAdams family and the Cowsleys for years. It's now owned by a corporation. InBev, didn't come in and take over this company for a hostile bid. It was sold by the Bush family with the agreement of the shareholders, by the way, who got a premium for their outstanding shares when they sold them. And part of InBev's promise was, we're going to make this a more profitable company and a higher return on your investment as shareholders. They've done exactly what they said they were going to do. They've eliminated duplication of services. That's a way that you save a lot of money when you take over into the company. They have reevaluated all expense lines, and some they've decided to continue because it makes sense. Some they've decided that may not be the way we want to continue. Whether or not the employees, who by their own admission had pretty cushy jobs when you worked for Anheuser-Busch, you went to work for Anheuser-Busch and you retired there. You got, 2 cases of beer free a week, and you had a pretty nice time. Those people, I'm sure, are upset. I would be too. It's just I didn't work for Anheuser-Busch. The ones that I kind of laugh at is the ones that say, well, I'm going to boycott Anheuser-Busch because they're not, family owned anymore, so I'm going to drink Miller's. Miller is owned by South African Brewing Company, as is Coors. Well, you're going to teach InBev, the Belgian company, you're going to teach them something by switching to a beer that's owned by South African Brewing Company. I understand the people that feel like their institution has changed. I would probably feel the same way, but what it all boils down to is, do they put out a good product? And as a public company, do they provide value to their shareholders? And I think that's what InBev does, what they said they were going to do, and they continue to do so.
Pat, Illinois lawmakers are looking at moving forward with a plan to create an online insurance exchange in Illinois. If they do, that's going to cost roughly $89 million, but some say they need to do it, but they don't know how to pay for it. Bottom line is, does it make sense to move forward with that exchange at this point?
They're going to forsake some federal money if they don't do it. They're going to forsake quite a bit of control when the Affordable Health Care Act takes effect. The exchange helps match uninsured with the various insurance plans. The insurance companies want the exchange sooner rather than later, because the sooner they see how the exchange is put together, then the sooner they'll know how to tailor particular policies and products to meet the expectations of that exchange. The big battleground in the short term, aside of whether to do it right away, is whether to have insurance executives on the board and how many to allow, and how much will this be an independent operation, how much will it be a creature of the insurance companies.
Jim, move forward.
It is an unfunded mandate. They're going to have to do it to preserve the federal money. I don't know how the state's going to pay for it, but they can't afford not to.
That's going to do it for this round of Metro Talk. Thanks for being with us. I'm Kent Scheffel. Pat Gowan with the Post-Dispatch has been here, along with Jim Schrader from the Telegraph. We'll see you next time.